You've just finished a workout. You know that feeling. Your body feels a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
But how much of that is really about the physical work and how much is just, well, how you feel about it?
That mind-body connection.
Exactly. Today we're diving into that fascinating intersection, specifically for soccer players.
Right.
Our mission, we want to unpack how different kinds of soccer training impact perceived effort.
Even when the actual physiological demands are kept pretty similar.
Yeah, and we think there are some really surprising insights here for coaches, for athletes, on maybe optimizing training a bit better.
And we're basing this deep dive on a really interesting study.
Lay it on us. What's the source?
It's titled, Effects of Small-Sided Games and High-Intensity Interval Training on the Rating of Perceived Exertion in Soccer Players Across Competitive Levels, Controlling for Percentage of Heart Rate Reserve.
Okay, that's quite a title. But sounds like it gets right to the point.
It does. The authors are Weiqiang, Robert Trybulski, Lil Ro, Grzegorz Trybek, Waldemar Moska, Yufei, and Filipe Manuel Clemente.
Got it. And where can people find it?
It was published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine, volume 24, back in 2025, pages 603 to 612.
Great. So what's the core idea they're exploring?
Well, they're looking at RPE, that's perceived exertion, in soccer players doing different types of training. But the really key thing, they controlled for the player's internal physiological load. They use something called percentage of heart rate reserve.
Okay, controlling the load, that sounds important. Why is that bit so crucial?
Because it lets you separate how hard someone feels they're working from how hard their body is actually working, physiologically speaking.
Right, so let's start there then. RPE, rating of perceived exertion. Can you break that down a bit? It's more than just heart rate.
Yeah, absolutely. RPE is a subjective measure. It's literally asking the athlete, how hard do you feel like you're working right now?
So it pulls in everything, like breathing, muscle ache, even focus.
Exactly. It integrates all those physiological signals, heart rate, breathing, fatigue, but also psychological factors, things like motivation, maybe even boredom sometimes.
Zelda by Gunnar Borg, wasn't it, using that scale?
That's the one. The study used his Borg CR10 scale, which is very common, and it's so versatile you see it used everywhere in sports.
Why is it so popular, especially in soccer?
Because it gives coaches a really valuable window into the athlete's experience. It helps monitor training load, fine-tune things, and maybe most importantly, helps flag the risk of overtraining or burnout before it gets serious.
Which is huge for keeping players healthy and performing long-term. But how reliable is it, being subjective?
It's surprisingly reliable. Lots of research shows a strong correlation between RPE and objective markers like heart rate. For example, in elite soccer players, the correlation is quite high, something like R equals 0.75.
So players are generally pretty good at gauging their own effort accurately.
They are, yeah. It's a dependable tool.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, back to that control variable you mentioned, the percentage of heart rate reserve, or percentage heart reserve. Why add that complexity if RPE tracks well with heart rate anyway?
Well, think about it. If you want to know if, say, small-sided games feel different from interval training, you need to make sure the underlying physical effort is actually the same, right?
Ah, I see. Otherwise, you might just be comparing an easy session to a hard one.
Precisely. So controlling for internal load, using something like percentage reserve, allows you to isolate the effect of the training format itself on perception.
Got it. And how is percentage reserve different from just looking at beats per minute?
It's more personalized. Percentage reserve calculates intensity based on the range between an athlete's maximum heart rate and their resting heart rate.
Okay.
So it reflects the intensity relative to that specific individual's cardiovascular capacity. A heart rate of, say, minus 60 BPM might be moderate for one player, but near maximal for another. Percentage reserve accounts for that.
Right. So it truly factors in individual fitness levels. That's clever.
It is. Coaches use it a lot in soccer to gauge cardiovascular load accurately, adjust training, minimize risks, and importantly for this study, it also correlates significantly with RPE itself.
So it validates the whole approach. Okay, now we understand the tools RPE for the feeling, percentage reserve for the actual load. How did they apply this in the study? What training formats did they compare?
They looked at two main types, both really common in soccer, small-sided games or SSGs.
Like 5v5, maybe 1v1 drills.
Exactly, things like 5v5 and 1v1. These are great for skills, tactics, agility, and players often find them more engaging, more fun.
Yeah, more game-like. And the other type,
high-intensity interval training, or HIIT.
the lung busters.
Yeah.
Suicide, sprints, that kind of thing.
Pretty much. Short bursts of intense work followed by recovery, excellent for building speed, endurance, that repeat sprint ability, crucial in soccer.
So different focuses, but physiologically, can they be similar?
Interestingly, yes. Both SSGs and HIIT can lead to similar gains in aerobic fitness and high-intensity performance. Often heart rate responses, even blood lactate, can look comparable.
But the feeling might be different.
That's the key question. And that's where this study adds value. A lot of previous comparisons didn't rigorously control that internal load.
So differences in RPE could have just been because one session was physically harder.
Exactly. This study used Presencia Reserve specifically to level that playing field, to make sure any differences in RPE were really down to the type of training, not just the raw physical output.
Makes sense. So tell us about the setup. Who are the players?
They've recruited 77 male university soccer players in China. And they carefully categorized them into 2 competitive levels based on a standard framework.
What were the levels?
They had a Tier 2 groupthink trained developmental players, maybe from a provincial league, and a Tier 3 group. These were highly trained national-level players from higher university divisions.
Okay, so they could compare across skill levels too. And what did the actual experiment involve?
First, every player did fitness testing to get their individual HR max and resting HR, essential for calculating that percent reserve. Then, over a couple of weeks, each player did 4 different training sessions in a random order.
The ones we mentioned.
Yep. A 5v5 SSG, a 1v1 SSG, a long HIIT session, and a short HIIT session.
And I bet they controlled the conditions tightly.
Absolutely meticulous. Heart rate monitored constantly. RPE reported immediately after each session using the Borg scale.
Environment, time of day.
All standardized.
Yeah.
Outdoors, artificial pitch, same time window in the late afternoon. Similar weather conditions recorded, standard warm-ups, balanced teams for the SSGs, even consistent verbal encouragement from the coaches.
Wow, okay. They really tried to isolate the variables. And the stats. They used that percentage reserve in the analysis.
Yes, they use what's called a linear mixed effects model. This let them look at the effect of competitive level and training format on RPE, while statistically controlling for a percentage reserve as a covariate.
Meaning they could mathematically remove the influence of slight variations in internal load.
That's the idea. It makes the findings about the training format and competitive level much more robust.
Okay, the setup sounds solid. Let's get to the juicy part. What did they find? What were the main results?
Well, first off, maybe a little surprising. There wasn't an overall difference in RPE between the Tier 2 and Tier 3 players when you averaged everything out.
So the higher level players didn't just generally find everything easier.
Not overall, no.
Right.
But, and this is key, there was a significant interaction between the training format and the competitive level.
Interaction, meaning?
Meaning the effect of the training format on how hard it felt depended on whether you were a Tier 2 or Tier 3 player. The type of training affected the 2 groups differently.
Okay, that is interesting. So it's not one size fits all. Did some training types generally feel harder than others, regardless of player level?
Yes, there was a definite main effect of training format. RPE varied significantly across the 4 types of sessions.
Which brings us to what you hinted at earlier, the really surprising bit.
This is the one that makes you pause. The Tier 3 players, remember, the highly trained national level ones, reported significantly higher RPE during the short HIIT sessions compared to the Tier 2 players.
Hold on. The more trained players felt the short, intense intervals were harder.
Significantly harder, yes. And it wasn't a small difference. The effect size was large.
That seems completely backwards. You'd expect them to handle high intensity better, perceive it as less effortful because they're fitter.
Exactly. It's counterintuitive. It really suggests that perceptual responses are complex. Maybe the nature of short HIIT, very intense, quick changes, interacts differently with the physiology or even psychology of highly trained players. It shows RPE isn't just a simple reflection of fitness level across all conditions.
Wow, that really challenges assumptions. Okay, so short HII was surprisingly tough for the top guys. What about the other end? Was anything consistently perceived as easier?
Yes, definitely. The 5v5 small-sided games.
Ah, the bigger game format.
Right. Both Tier 2 and Tier 3 players consistently reported lower RPE during the 5v5 SSGs compared to the 1v1 SSGs and both types of HIIT.
So playing in a slightly larger team game just felt less demanding, even if their heart rates were working at a similar relative intensity.
That's what the data suggests. For the Tier 3 players, 5v5 felt significantly easier than everything else, 1v1, long HIIT, short HIIT. For Tier 2, It was significantly easier than 1v1.
That's a really practical finding. And just to confirm that control variable, the percent reserve, did it actually matter in the analysis?
It absolutely did. The statistical analysis confirmed that percent reserve had a significant effect on RPE.
So internal load does influence perceived effort, as expected.
Yes, which validates using it as a control. And the fact that these other differences between training formats and the interaction with player levels still showed up after accounting for percent to reserve makes those findings even stronger.
Okay, so let's pull this all together. What are the big takeaways? What does this mean for coaches, for players, maybe even for recreational athletes listening?
I think the biggest takeaway is just reinforcing how multidimensional RPE is. It's not just physiology.
Right, it's body and mind.
Exactly. Even when you match the cardiovascular demand, the format of the training, how it's structured, the context significantly changes how hard players feel they're working.
So for a coach on the field, how does this translate into practice?
Well, strategically, knowing that 5v5 SSGs generally elicit lower perceived exertion for a similar internal load is powerful.
How so?
Coaches could use larger-sided games, like 5v5, to maintain a good cardiovascular stimulus, but maybe reduce the perceived load, the psychological strain.
Like on a recovery day, or maybe when introducing complex tactics. Keep the physical work up, but make it feel less draining.
Precisely. It allows for managing that mental load alongside the physical load.
That's smart. And what about the finding with the Tier 3 players and short HIIT?
That highlights the coaches really need to understand their specific group. What feels intensely demanding might vary based on competitive level, even in ways you don't expect.
So don't assume your fittest players will always perceive intense work as easier.
Not necessarily, especially with certain types of HIIT, it seems. It reinforces the need for individualized monitoring and understanding tier-specific responses.
Which points towards using both types of monitoring.
Absolutely. The study really supports an integrated approach. Monitor the objective load using things like percentage at reserve or other tech, and monitor the subjective load via RPE. Combining both gives you a much richer, more accurate picture for managing training, optimizing performance, and keeping players healthy.
Makes total sense. Now, with any study, there are usually some limitations. Anything listeners should keep in mind here?
Sure, it's important context. The study focused on university-level Tier 2 and Tier 3 players.
So maybe not directly applicable to absolute elite pros or youth players?
Potentially, yes. Findings might not generalize perfectly to those groups. Also, while percentage reserve is good, it's still just one measure of internal load.
It doesn't capture everything.
Right. It doesn't tell you about, say, metabolic stress like blood lactate directly or neuromuscular fatigue, and psychological factors like motivation or mood weren't directly measured, though they likely influence RPE.
So there's still more to explore.
Definitely. This study is great, but it opens doors for future research, maybe looking at elite players, using more physiological markers, adding psychological assessments to get an even fuller picture of what drives perceived effort.
This has been fascinating. It really makes you think differently about your own workouts, doesn't it? Like, what makes something feel hard for you? Is it just the intensity, or is it the type of activity, the monotony, the complexity?
Yeah, even if your heart rate monitor says the same thing, the experience can be totally different. It's a good thing to reflect on.
If you, the listener, want to really get into the nitty-gritty of this research, we definitely encourage you to check out the full article.
Yep, it was in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine, 2025, Volume 24. Effects of small-sided games and high-intensity interval training on the rating of perceived exertion. Well, you heard the full title earlier.
We did. And if you found this deep dive useful, please do follow our channel.
Yeah, turn on those notifications so you don't miss the next one. We'll keep digging into interesting research like this.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
See you next time.